The letter arrived folded too many times, its creases softened by long travel and second thoughts. Elias Crow stood at the counter, turning it over, as if the paper itself might tell him whether opening it would change anything. Outside, late afternoon light spilled across the kitchen floor, catching dust motes and turning them into brief constellations. The house smelled of coffee gone cold and pine cleaner, familiar, unremarkable, steady. At 62, Elias had learned to trust what endured. He slit the envelope carefully. The mail order agency's letterhead was crisp and impersonal, promising compatibility through questionnaires and algorithms. He skimmed it and set it aside. Beneath it lay a single page written by hand. He recognized the difference immediately, the slight wavering of ink where a pen had paused, the uneven margins that came from writing something meant to be read slowly. Mara Volkov, it began. No flourish, just a name that sounded like winter wind moving through tall grass. She wrote plainly. She was tall, older, strong from work rather than exercise. She had buried a husband, raised children who had lives of their own now. She wanted a place where her strength would be useful and her quiet would be welcome. Elias felt an unexpected relief at the absence of coyness. The words didn't ask to be admired. They asked to be understood. Near the end, the sentence that made him sit down appeared, set apart by a space as though it needed room to breathe. Can you plant your seed inside me? I mean a future, roots, something that stays. Elias read it twice, then once more slower. He thought of the land outside. Acres of soil he had worked since he was a boy. Soil that remembered every season, whether it had been kind or cruel. He thought of the two women he had loved and lost. Of the way the house had grown quieter, not all at once but gradually, like a radio turned down over years. He folded the letter again and rested it against his chest, feeling its thinness, its weight. The bus arrived 2 days later, late, its engine coughing dust into the air. Elias stood by the fence, hat in hand, unsure whether to wave or wait. When the door opened, Mara stepped down with a single suitcase and a posture that suggested she was accustomed to arriving alone. She was taller than he had imagined, taller than him by a head, and broad-shouldered, her build neither apologetic nor imposing, simply present. Silver threaded her dark hair, catching the sun. Her eyes took in the ranch in one slow sweep as if she were greeting it. They looked at each other, both searching for the person they had already begun to know, through ink and imagination. Elias felt his breath settle when she smiled, not brightly, but with a warmth that reached her eyes. I'm Elias, he said, offering his hand. Mara, she replied. Her grip was firm, practiced. Thank you for meeting me. Thank you for coming, he said, and meant it more than he had expected. The drive to the house passed mostly in companionable quiet. Elias pointed out the creek, the old barn, the stand of cottonwoods that broke the wind in winter. Mara listened, nodding, asking small, practical questions. When they reached the porch, she paused, resting a hand on the railing. It feels patient here, she said. He smiled, surprised by the accuracy of it. It's had practice. They walked the fence line as evening gathered, the sky shifting from blue to copper. Cattle moved in the distance, their low sounds carrying on the cooling air. Elias found himself talking about the way the land demanded attention without hurry, about storms that came fast and left their marks. Mara spoke of a city life that had grown loud and narrow, of nights spent listening for other people's needs until she could no longer hear her own. At a bend in the fence, she stopped. About my letter, she said, not looking at him at first. I worried it was too direct. He considered his words. It was honest, he said finally. That matters. She turned to face him then, her expression steady. I have no interest in pretending to be younger or softer than I am. I am looking for a place to put what I have left to give. Elias felt something shift, not a rush, but a recognition. I can offer work, he said. And quiet. And a land that keeps its promises, even when they're hard. That is enough to begin, she said. When night fell, they sat on the porch steps, sharing a pot of coffee that tasted better for the company. The stars came out one by one, familiar to Elias, newly wondrous to her. She leaned back on her hands, gazing up. I don't need rescuing, she said softly. I wouldn't know how, he replied. She laughed then, a low sound that felt like it belonged in the open air. The laughter settled into a silence that wasn't empty. Elias realized he was not counting the hours until sleep. He was present in a way he had not been for years. As she rose to go inside, he felt the weight of the moment. not as pressure but as possibility. The letter's question echoed, transformed by the day they had shared. Planting, he knew, was not about forcing growth. It was about choosing the ground and committing to the care. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll show you the fields." She nodded. "I would like that." And as the porch light clicked off and the house settled around them, Elias understood that whatever came next would be tended slowly, with hands that knew both loss and hope. Morning came quietly, the way it often did on the ranch, without ceremony but with intention. Pale light crept through the thin curtains and settled across the wooden floor, tracing familiar lines Elias had memorized over decades. He woke before the sun fully cleared the hills, as he always had. But this time there was a subtle difference, a sense that the day was not merely repeating itself. It was beginning something. He rose, careful not to make noise, and brewed coffee. The kettle's low hiss felt companionable rather than lonely. Outside, the air was cool and damp, the scent of earth rich from a light rain during the night. He stood at the door for a moment, breathing it in, listening to the distant lowing of cattle and the chorus of birds, announcing their small triumph over darkness. Mara appeared a few minutes later, already dressed, boots laced, hair pulled back. She looked rested, alert, as if the land had spoken to her in her sleep and she had understood it. She accepted a mug of coffee with a nod of thanks and stepped onto the porch beside him. "This place wakes up slowly," she said. "So do I," Elias replied. "That's how we get along." After breakfast, he led her toward the lower field, where the soil had been turned in anticipation of spring planting. The ground was dark and soft, holding the memory of rain. Elias took up the hoe, his movements practiced, economical. Age had slowed him, but it had also refined him. Nothing was wasted, not a step, not a motion. Mara watched for a moment, then stepped closer. "Show me," she said simply. He handed her the tool without hesitation. She tested its weight, adjusted her grip, and began to work. Her movements were strong, steady, guided by intuition rather than instruction. Elias felt an unexpected swell of pride, not ownership, not possession, but recognition. She belonged here in the same way he did, not by claim, but by care. They worked side by side for hours, trading tools, trading quiet comments. The sun climbed, warming their backs. When they paused to rest, sitting on overturned buckets at the edge of the field, Mara wiped her brow and looked out over the furrows they had made together. "I have spent much of my life tending what others planted," she said. "Children, a marriage, even jobs. I don't regret it, but I want now to see something grow because I chose the ground." Elias nodded, his gaze following hers. "This land taught me that nothing grows just because you want it to. You have to be willing to stay when it looks like nothing is happening." She smiled at that. "I am very good at staying." The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than arranged. They repaired a section of fence the wind had taken, shared meals cooked simply and eaten slowly, learned each other's habits without comment. Mara rose early, matching Elias's pace. But she also brought changes, a different spice in the stew. A song hummed while hanging laundry, laughter that startled the walls into remembering they were still a home. At night, they sat on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes not. The silence between them grew comfortable, layered with trust. When intimacy came, it was not rushed or dramatic. It arrived the way weather does, felt before it is seen, inevitable once it is understood. Their closeness was gentle, marked by respect and a shared awareness of time's value. What mattered was not passion alone, but presence. Hands that did not hurry, eyes that did not look away. Weeks passed. The fields began to show signs of life. Small green shoots pushed through the soil, fragile and determined. Mara knelt to examine them, her fingers hovering just above the leaves as if touch itself might be too much. "They made it," she said softly. Elias stood beside her, hands on his hips, feeling a quiet satisfaction deepen into something steadier. "They always try," he said. "Our job is to give them a chance." She looked up at him then, her expression open. "Do you ever worry," she asked, "that it is too late to start something new?" He considered the question carefully. "Late compared to what?" he asked. "The land doesn't know our ages. It only knows whether we show up." That night, as the stars spread across the sky, Mara rested her head against his shoulder. "In my letter," she said, "I asked a question that frightened me." "And now?" he asked. "Now I think it was not a question," she said. "It was an invitation." Elias felt her words settle into him, not as pressure but as peace. He thought of the years ahead, uncertain, finite, precious. He thought of mornings like this one, of shared work and shared rest. He thought of how the land, once indifferent to his solitude, now seemed to lean toward them as if curious. In the weeks that followed, neighbors took note. A tall woman working the fields, lights on later at night, laughter carrying across the fence. Elias did not mind the attention. He had learned that a life tended openly grows stronger roots. One afternoon, after a long day, they stood together at the edge of the field. The plants were taller now, leaves unfurling confidently toward the sun. Mara slipped her hand into his, her grip familiar and sure. "See?" she said. "The land remembers what we give it." Elias squeezed her hand gently. "So do people," he replied. And in that shared space between soil and sky, between past and promise, they understood that what they had planted was more than seed. It was a choice renewed each day, to grow something that would last as long as it could, tended with care until the very end.